Imagine this. You wake up tomorrow and nothing seems wrong. People go to work, drink coffee, scroll their feeds. Everything looks normal, but then you notice something. No one is thinking for themselves anymore. Their words sound rehearsed, their beliefs copied, and every eye you meet carries the same hollow, obedient stare. Now, here's the nightmare. They don't know it's happening. They think you are the strange one, and if you question it, if you refuse to join in, you will be treated like a threat. This is not a dystopian movie. It's a psychological epidemic spreading right now, turning billions into blind followers without them ever realizing it. Psychologists call it mass delusion. I call it the most dangerous mind virus in human history, because once it infects you, it does not just control what you do, it controls who you are. And in the next few minutes, I'm going to show you exactly how this virus spreads through entire societies without force or violence. The psychological tricks that make even intelligent people obey without question. And most importantly, the hidden antidote that can make you immune for life. Stay until the end, because if you miss even one piece of this, you might never see the world the same way again. It does not spread through the air. It does not live on surfaces. And yet, it's more contagious than any biological disease in history. It spreads through attention, through belief, through the small, almost invisible ways we imitate each other's thoughts without ever realizing it. Psychologists and historians have given it many names: mass psychosis, mass hysteria, collective delusion. I call it the invisible virus, a force that does not just change what you think, it rewires how you think. And here's what makes it terrifying. Once you're infected, you don't feel sick. You feel right. You feel certain. And you will defend that certainty with the same instinct you would use to defend your own life. This is why mass delusion is so dangerous. It does not make people look insane. It makes them look normal, in a way that's just slightly off, like actors in a play who don't realize they're acting. We like to believe that human beings are rational creatures, that if we have access to science, history, philosophy, and countless tools for critical thinking, we will use them. But history tells a different story. Entire civilizations have collapsed, not because of outside enemies, but because of illusions they created for themselves. False beliefs repeated until they became reality. Lies woven into the very definition of truth. In the 17th century, the philosopher René Descartes warned that our senses can deceive us. He couldn't have imagined just how far that deception could go, not just in an individual mind, but across entire societies. Gustave Le Bon, the father of crowd psychology, described how individuals lose their moral compass and critical thinking the moment they merge into a crowd. The crowd becomes emotional, impulsive, easily led. The person disappears. Carl Jung took it further. He warned that when people lose meaning, purpose, or spiritual grounding, they will look for it in the herd. And the herd is almost always driven by fear, propaganda, and the desperate need to belong, even at the cost of truth. Think about what you have seen in the last few years alone. People repeating slogans they barely understand, supporting movements they've never researched, attacking others simply for asking a question. This is the virus at work. It bypasses debate. It bypasses evidence. It locks people into an emotional trance where belonging feels safer than reality. And it's not just ignorance. That would be easier to fix. Mass delusion thrives among the educated, the credentialed, the informed. Because intelligence without awareness is like a ship without a compass. It can drift anywhere, and it often drifts exactly where the crowd is already going. So here's the question we have to face. If this invisible virus is everywhere, how do we even recognize it? The truth is, mass delusion does not spread randomly. It follows a pattern, the same psychological rituals repeated in different forms throughout history. Once you can spot them, you'll see them everywhere, in the news, in your workplace, even in your own social circles. These are the 4 contagion rituals, the mechanisms that turn ordinary people into blind followers without them even knowing it. Ritual 1. Borrowed certainty. I don't know why I believe it. I just know it's true. When people stop building their beliefs from their own reasoning, they start borrowing certainty from somewhere else. It might be a celebrity, a news anchor, a political figure, a trending post on social media. And once they adopt that belief, they defend it as if it was theirs all along. In today's world, this ritual is everywhere. You see it in the blind repetition of slogans, 5-word phrases printed on t-shirts, shouted in protests, used as moral shields. You see it in, as seen on, authority bias, where the simple fact that an idea appears on a big platform is enough to make people trust it. It's fast, it's easy, and it feels safe. Visual symbolism. Q. A human head made of paper, with printed words being stamped on it over and over, erasing the original face underneath. Study anchor. Psychologist Robert Cialdini's work on authority bias shows that people are more likely to believe and obey if the source looks credible, regardless of whether the information is true. When borrowed certainty spreads, real thinking dies. Because people aren't defending truth, they're defending ownership of an idea they never questioned. Ritual 2. Emotional flooding. I can't think straight. I just feel it. This is the hijacking of logic by high-intensity emotions, usually fear, outrage, or moral disgust. When your nervous system is flooded, your brain shifts from reasoning to reacting. And the scary part? It feels good in the moment. That rush of anger, that shock of fear. It makes you feel alive, certain, righteous. Modern culture is addicted to emotional flooding. It's baked into the design of social media. Headlines engineered to spike your pulse. Videos designed to provoke instant outrage. Out-of-context clips meant to trigger fear before you can think. And the more emotional you are, the more you share. And the more the algorithm rewards that content. It's a perfect storm. Outrage spreads because it's profitable. Visual symbolism. Q. A brain submerged in dark, swirling water, with lightning flashes of red and yellow, the colors of rage and fear pulsing through it. Study anchor. Neuroscientist Joseph Ledoux found that the brain's fear circuits can bypass the rational prefrontal cortex entirely, triggering reaction before reasoning. This ritual does not just spread false ideas. It locks them in place, because once an idea is tied to a powerful emotion, challenging it feels like a personal attack. Ritual 3. The social proof. Loop. If everyone believes it, it must be right. Humans are wired for herd behavior. It's a survival instinct. In the wild, doing what everyone else is doing keeps you safe. In the modern world, it often leads you straight into mass delusion. The social proof loop works like this. 1. You hear an idea repeated over and over. 2. You assume it must be popular. 3. Popularity becomes proof of truth. 4. The cycle reinforces itself. More believers, more repetition, more believers. You see this in viral hashtags, trending political opinions, and corporate culture decks that everyone nods at in meetings, but no one questions. And here's the trap. Even when people privately doubt the belief, they stay silent because they think everyone else agrees. This is called pluralistic ignorance, and it keeps the illusion alive. Visual symbolism. A sea of identical masks with smiling faces, all facing one way, except one mask turned toward the viewer with a questioning expression. Study anchor, Solomon Asch's famous conformity experiment, 1951, showed that 75% of participants gave obviously wrong answers at least once, just because the group did. The social proof loop does not just silence dissent, it makes dissent invisible. Ritual 4. Isolation conditioning. If you question it, you'll lose everything. This is the final lock on the prison door. Once a belief has spread through borrowed certainty, emotional flooding, and social proof, isolation conditioning makes sure no one escapes. It works by making the cost of disagreement feel too high. Loss of friends, loss of status, loss of belonging, sometimes even loss of livelihood. The moment people see a dissenter punished, whether it's through public shaming, ridicule, or social exile, the message is clear. Step out of line, and you're next. Modern examples? Public cancellation campaigns. Group chats where one person is quietly removed for disagreeing. Corporate environments where questioning leadership ends careers. Visual symbolism. Q. A single figure in a vast, empty space, surrounded by faint, ghostly outlines of others who have turned their backs. Study anchor. Social pain activates the same brain regions as physical pain. Eisenberger et al., 2003. This is why exclusion feels dangerous. The brain treats it as a survival threat. Isolation conditioning keeps people compliant, not because they believe, but because the alternative is unthinkable. These 4 contagion rituals don't happen in isolation. They work together, feeding, amplifying, and protecting each other until an entire society is under the spell. And here's the most dangerous part. They can take hold in any group, left or right, rich or poor, educated or uneducated. The moment you stop questioning, the moment you let the rituals run unchecked, the virus spreads. But if you can see the rituals, you can stop them. And once you stop them, you can break the spell. Mass delusion is not powered by stupidity. It's powered by the very wiring that once kept our ancestors alive. For most of human history, survival wasn't about being right. It was about belonging. If the tribe accepted you, you ate, you slept safely, and your children lived. If the tribe cast you out, you didn't survive long enough to pass on your DNA. That ancient equation is still running in your brain right now, and it has one dangerous line of code: belonging greater than truth. The human brain does not just prefer belonging, it fears being the odd one out. That fear isn't abstract. Your nervous system treats it like a life or death threat. Modern ridicule may not kill you, but your body reacts as if it could. This is why a sarcastic comment in a meeting can make your pulse race. Why disagreeing with your social group feels like stepping off a cliff. It's also why most people stay silent, even when they see something is wrong. When you realize this, mass delusion stops being a mystery. The cost of truth-telling is not just social discomfort. It's a primal alarm screaming danger. On top of that survival instinct, your brain has another efficiency hack: confirmation bias. It actively searches for information that confirms what you already believe and ignores what challenges it. Why? Because doubt is mentally expensive. The more uncertain you are, the harder your brain has to work. Psychologists call this cognitive ease, your brain's preference for the path of least mental resistance. When an idea is familiar, repeated often, and supported by the people around you, your brain processes it more easily and mistakes that ease for truth. So even if you could dig deeper, your biology rewards you for not bothering. But the modern world didn't just inherit these instincts, it learned to monetize them. Social media gives you a dopamine reward every time your opinion is liked, shared, or validated. It also rewards outrage. The more extreme your reaction, the more attention you get. This creates a neurochemical feedback loop. You post something aligned with the group, you get approval. Dopamine hits your system. You repeat the behavior. The same loop works for outrage. You see a post that triggers fear or anger. You react and share it. The reaction gets reinforced by your group. Dopamine seals the habit. It's no coincidence that the content that spreads fastest online is either emotionally charged or identity affirming, ideally both. Let me give you a real-world example. In 2019, a mid-level manager at a well-known company raised concerns in a team meeting about a new corporate initiative. He didn't attack it, he simply asked for the supporting data. Within a week, he noticed subtle changes. He was left out of informal chats. His manager stopped looping him into key projects. Colleagues avoided sitting next to him in the cafeteria. No one openly said, "You're out." But the message was clear: you've questioned the group, and now you're on your own. By the end of the quarter, he'd transferred to another department just to escape the tension. His punishment wasn't official, it was social. And that's what makes it so effective. It leaves no fingerprints. When you combine these forces, the primal fear of exclusion, the comfort of cognitive ease, and the chemical addiction to group approval, you create the perfect conditions for blind following. In this state, people aren't evaluating ideas, they're evaluating safety. The question isn't, is this true? But, will I still belong if I agree? Mass delusion thrives here because the herd doesn't need to prove anything. It only needs to reward loyalty and punish dissent. Once that dynamic is in place, even the intelligent, the educated, and the self-proclaimed independent thinkers can be absorbed. And here's the worst part. The more a person has invested in the group's beliefs, their reputation, their social network, even their career, the harder it is for them to break away. To do so would mean admitting they were wrong, losing status, and facing that primal fear of isolation head on. That's why awakening from mass delusion is not just an intellectual challenge, it's an emotional and social one. Every psychological virus has a life cycle. It does not appear fully formed. It grows, it evolves, and it eventually collapses. Mass delusion is no different. If you understand its 5 stages, you can recognize the infection early, and maybe even avoid being pulled in. Stage 1: disorientation, loss of trust in the old world, craving for order. It begins quietly. Institutions that once seemed unshakable start to crumble. Leaders break promises, systems fail. The stories we've told ourselves no longer make sense, and nothing has come to replace them. When this happens, people feel disoriented. The ground beneath them shifts, and in that uncertainty, the human mind begins to crave order. Any order. Historical example: the economic collapse of the Weimar Republic in the 1920s left Germany in chaos. In that vacuum, simplistic promises of stability became intoxicating. Modern parallel: declining trust in media, governments, and institutions in the 21st century. People gravitating toward any source that feels certain, even if it's unverified. Symbolic visual anchor: a compass spinning wildly, unable to find north. T's of antidote: disorientation is dangerous because it makes you reach for the first lifeline. But the real antidote begins with learning to stand in uncertainty without grasping at illusions. Stage 2: simplification. Narratives erase nuance, offer clear villains and heroes. Into the fog of disorientation comes a voice, or many voices, offering a simple story. They tell you exactly who's to blame, what to fear, and what will fix it all. It feels good to hear. Complexity vanishes. Everything becomes black or white, good or evil, us versus them. Historical example: during the French Revolution, chaos gave way to simple narratives, the virtuous people versus the corrupt aristocracy. This oversimplification fueled mass executions during the Reign of Terror. Modern parallel: social media movements that distill complex issues into hashtag slogans, leaving no room for nuance or debate. Symbolic visual anchor: a massive jigsaw puzzle with most pieces missing, yet someone is holding up a tiny perfect square and calling it the whole picture. T's of antidote: simplification feels safe, but the antidote demands a tolerance for nuance, the ability to hold opposing truths without rushing to erase one. Stage 3: conformity. Pluralistic ignorance. Silence becomes complicity. Once the narrative is established, people start falling in line, not because they all believe it, but because they think everyone else does. This is pluralistic ignorance, the illusion of consensus created by mutual silence. And silence is contagious. The fewer people speak up, the harder it becomes for anyone else to try. Before long, disagreement all but disappears, not because it's gone, but because it's hidden. Historical example: in the McCarthy era of the 1950s America, fear of being labeled un-American kept many from opposing baseless accusations. Modern parallel: corporate cultures where employees nod along in meetings, agreeing with initiatives they privately doubt, just to avoid career damage. Symbolic visual anchor: a room full of mannequins facing the same direction. One human in the back, frozen in indecision. T's of antidote: conformity is broken the moment one voice speaks with courage. But the antidote is not loud rebellion, it's strategic, thoughtful dissent. Stage 4: aggression. The crowd enforces norms, dissent becomes dangerous. Now the delusion defends itself. Anyone who resists the narrative is no longer just wrong, they're an enemy. The crowd polices itself. Friends turn on friends. Censorship increases. Ridicule becomes a weapon. And in some cases, punishment moves from the social to the physical. Historical example: during China's Cultural Revolution, 1966 to 1976, ordinary citizens were encouraged to publicly denounce and humiliate neighbors, teachers, even family members for thought crimes. Modern parallel: Online cancel campaigns that aim not just to challenge ideas, but to destroy reputations and livelihoods. Symbolic visual anchor. A pack of wolves circling a single animal, teeth bared, eyes glowing with the same cold light. Tease of antidote. Aggression thrives when dissent is emotional. The antidote is mastering emotional sovereignty, so you can resist without being dragged into the rage. Stage 5. Awakening. Cracks in the illusion, painful realization. No mass delusion lasts forever. Eventually, reality pushes back. Contradictions become too obvious to ignore. The promises stop matching the results. The illusion begins to fracture. Awakening can be slow, a quiet accumulation of doubts, or sudden, like a dam breaking. But it is always painful. Historical example. The collapse of the Soviet Union revealed decades of state-crafted falsehoods to its citizens, many of whom had believed the official narratives their whole lives. Modern parallel. Individuals leaving extremist online communities after realizing their leaders contradicted themselves or exploited followers for personal gain. Symbolic visual anchor. A cracked mask lying on the ground, with a human face emerging from the shadow beneath. Tease of antidote. Awakening is only the first step. The antidote is learning how to live in truth without needing the crowd's approval to survive. Right now, the question is, where are we in this cycle? Some would say we're deep in stage 4, where aggression is normalized and dissent is costly. Others believe the cracks are already showing, that stage 5 has begun for those willing to see it. But here's the truth. No matter which stage you think we're in, the only way out is to understand the psychology that makes blind following so easy, and to build the habits that keep you immune. We like to imagine that the antidote to mass delusion is intelligence. That smart people, with degrees, credentials, and sharp reasoning skills, are naturally immune. But history shows the opposite. In fact, some of the most sophisticated propaganda campaigns have succeeded because they targeted the educated first. Here's the trap. Knowledge without awareness is like a ship without a compass. You can have the biggest library in the world, but if you don't question the source, direction, or motive behind what you read, you're still drifting. Smart people aren't immune. They're often more vulnerable. Why? Because intelligence can make you overconfident. You think, I would know if I were being misled. That confidence blinds you to the possibility that your mind has already been compromised. Then there's the problem of analysis paralysis. Highly intelligent people can see more variables, more possibilities, which sounds good in theory, but in practice it can leave them stuck in endless loops of overthinking. Faced with uncertainty, the temptation is to relieve the discomfort by adopting the safe position, the one most people around them already hold. It feels like a rational choice, but it's really just surrender to consensus. This is why, in times of crisis, you'll see brilliant minds aligning with the herd, not because they've been convinced, but because they're tired of standing alone in the fog. I have seen this play out in real life. A friend of mine, an accomplished lawyer with decades of experience, started posting passionate endorsements for a new policy in her field. It sounded righteous and urgent. When I asked her where she'd read about it, she sent me a link to a single article written by a think tank funded by the same group pushing the policy. She hadn't looked for counter-arguments, alternative perspectives, or even the raw data. This is someone trained to cross-examine witnesses and scrutinize evidence. And yet, when the topic was socially charged and emotionally loaded, her process disappeared. She would unconsciously switch from critical thinking to social alignment. Smart people have more mental tools, but tools don't protect you if you don't use them. In fact, the more intelligent you are, the more sophisticated your rationalizations become. You can explain away doubts, justify contradictions, and talk yourself into believing that you arrived at your conclusion independently, when really you borrowed it from the crowd. Mass delusion doesn't care how many books you've read. It doesn't care how complex your vocabulary is. It only cares whether you are willing to trade truth for belonging. If awareness is the lifeboat, most people, even the brightest, don't realize they're in the water. That's why breaking free requires more than facts, more than debate, more than IQ. It requires a set of habits, practiced deliberately, that keep your mind sovereign no matter how loud the crowd gets. If The 4 contagion rituals are the mechanisms that spread mass delusion. Then the Anticontagion protocol is your personal immune system. It's not about isolating yourself from the world. It's not about paranoia or building walls. It's about skill building, habits that keep your mind sovereign no matter how strong the pull of the crowd becomes. Here are the 5 steps you can start practicing today. Think of them as mental and emotional training drills, because awareness isn't just knowledge, it's muscle. Step 1. Cognitive firewall. Question the source, the benefit, and the emotional hook behind every idea. When a new idea comes your way, a news headline, a trending slogan, a viral video, don't just ask, is this true? Ask 3 deeper questions. 1. Who is saying this? And what's their track record? 2. Who benefits if I believe this? Follow the incentives. 3. Why am I feeling this emotion right now? Fear, anger, pride? Who planted it? This forces you to step out of autopilot and into conscious evaluation. It's like a firewall in a computer. It doesn't block everything, but it stops dangerous code from running before you've scanned it. Micro habit. For 1 week, before you share any piece of information, write down the source, the incentive, and the emotion it triggered. Even if you still share it, you'll share with awareness. Link 2. Contagion ritual. This directly disrupts borrowed certainty by making you verify the origin before adopting the belief. Step 2. Trigger tracking journal. Your emotional spikes for pattern awareness. Every time you feel a sudden rush of fear, outrage, or moral disgust, pause and make a note. Write down what triggered it, what story you told yourself about it, what action you took or wanted to take right after. Over time, you'll notice patterns, certain topics, sources, or people that reliably bypass your logic and hit you emotionally. Once you see the pattern, you can step back from it in real time. Micro habit. Keep a trigger log in your phone's notes app. 1 sentence per trigger is enough. Review it weekly to spot your personal weak points. Link 2. Contagion ritual. This weakens emotional flooding by making it visible instead of automatic. Step 3. Solitude calibration. Spend time alone each week to hear your own thoughts without input. We live in a constant stream of influence. News feeds, group chats, podcasts, videos. Even when you think you're thinking for yourself, you might just be remixing other people's voices. Solitude calibration is about clearing the noise long enough to hear your own signal. 1 hour a week, no phone, no input. Just you, your thoughts, and a blank page or a walk. At first, it will feel uncomfortable. That's normal. It's the withdrawal phase from constant mental stimulation. Micro habit. Schedule your solitude like a meeting you can't skip. Give it a fixed time, place, and duration. Link to contagion ritual. This disrupts social proof loop by letting you think without constant exposure to group consensus. Step 4. Contrarian reps practice expressing unpopular truths in safe environments. Courage is a muscle, and like any muscle, it weakens if you never use it. Contrarian reps are small, controlled exercises in speaking your mind, even when you suspect it's not the popular opinion. Start small. Share a nuanced take in a friendly conversation. Politely disagree with a trending opinion in a low-stakes online forum. Ask why in a meeting when something doesn't make sense. The point isn't to be provocative, it's to rewire your nervous system so that speaking an uncomfortable truth doesn't automatically trigger fear. Micro habit. Commit to 1 safe dissent per week. Keep it factual, calm, and brief. The goal is the rep, not the debate. Link to contagion ritual. This breaks isolation conditioning by showing your brain that disagreement doesn't always lead to exile. Step 5. The sanity circle. Build a small group of truth-oriented people for reality checks. Mass delusion thrives in echo chambers, but so does paranoia if you're completely alone. The solution is a sanity circle. 3 to 5 people you trust to value truth over comfort. Different perspectives, but shared commitment to honest conversation. Regular check-ins to test your ideas against reality. When you're unsure whether you're seeing clearly or being pulled by the crowd, your sanity circle becomes your external compass. Micro habit. Reach out to 1 person this week and suggest a monthly sanity call. Share the concept and set a time. Build from there. Link to contagion ritual. Counters all 4 rituals by providing feedback that isn't tied to mass consensus. When practiced consistently, the anti-contagion protocol turns awareness into instinct. Instead of being swept into the rituals, you start recognizing them in real time. Instead of reacting, you choose. Instead of drifting toward the crowd, you hold your course. And here's the real power. You don't need to convince the whole world to break the delusion. Mass movements begin to crumble the moment enough individuals become immune to their pull. But there's a cost to seeing clearly. And it's one most people aren't prepared to pay. Because once you've built immunity, you'll notice something else. The crowd won't always welcome you back. Awakening from mass delusion is not a feel-good movie moment. It's not a heroic soundtrack playing as the crowd applauds you for your clarity. More often, it's silence, distance, and the slow realization that some of the people you care about the most may never see the world the way you do. Throughout history, those who saw clearly often walked alone. Socrates accused of corrupting the youth because he dared to ask dangerous questions. Galileo confined to his home for pointing a telescope at the truth. Carl Jung criticized for confronting the shadows in human nature. George Orwell mocked and dismissed until the world caught up to his warnings. Their reward for clarity was not immediate respect. It was suspicion, ridicule, even exile. But here's the shift. That loneliness is not a curse. It's a rite of passage. It's proof you've stepped out of the hypnotic safety of the crowd. It's the growing pain of an identity no longer tied to approval. You start to notice the small manipulations that others miss, the emotional hooks in headlines, the subtle language designed to provoke rather than inform, the normalization of double standards. And once you notice, you can't unsee. You can't go back. That clarity can feel isolating until you realize it's also liberating. Every era has its quiet network of awake individuals. They may not be loud. They may not be in the spotlight, but they are watching, thinking, questioning. And when the time comes to act, to speak truth, to push back, to rebuild, they find each other. Your awareness puts you in that lineage. You are part of something bigger than the crowd, a global pattern of individuals who choose clarity over comfort, even when the cost is high. But here's the thing. Resisting the crowd is only half the journey, because as long as you define yourself by opposing the herd, you're still tethered to it. The real escape, the one most never reach, isn't just about breaking free from mass delusion. It's about transcending the need for the crowd altogether. The ultimate freedom is not rebellion. It's not just standing apart from the crowd, shouting your truth into the noise. It's something quieter and far more powerful. True freedom is when you no longer need the crowd's approval to exist in your truth. The Danish philosopher Søren Kierkegaard wrote, "The crowd is untruth." He didn't mean all groups are evil or that every collective belief is wrong. He meant that truth begins in the individual, in the soul that dares to know itself without mirrors. As long as you define yourself by reflection, by what others approve or reject, you are still owned by the crowd. Even rebellion can be a form of dependence if it needs an audience. Inside you, there is something older than your first opinion, deeper than your first belief, an inner compass buried under years of noise, fear, and imitation. Mass delusion tries to bury it beneath slogans, outrage, and the false safety of conformity. But it's never broken. Escaping the crowd is not about becoming something new. It's about remembering what you already are. When you find that compass, decisions become simpler. Not easier, but simpler. You stop chasing approval, you stop fearing rejection, you start navigating by your own true north. This is transcendence, the return to self. The ability to stand in a storm of opinions, judgments, and noise, and remain unmoved because you are rooted in something they cannot touch. It's not detachment born from apathy. It's clarity born from alignment. And here's the paradox. When you no longer need the crowd, you become the kind of person the crowd secretly longs to follow. Not because you demand it, but because your freedom reminds them of something ancient in themselves. An awakened individual is the most dangerous antidote to mass delusion. They cannot be bribed with belonging, silenced by fear, or swayed by emotional flooding. They don't fight the herd with hatred. They outgrow it with presence. And presence is contagious. Not in the way of a virus, but in the way a single flame can light 1,000 candles without losing its own fire. When you live this way, you stop being another voice in the crowd. You become the proof that another way is possible. If you have made it this far, you're not like the rest. You did not click away when the truth got uncomfortable. You stayed. You listened. You asked yourself the hard questions most people never dare to face. That tells me something important about you. You're already part of the quiet minority that chooses clarity over comfort. This is not a rebellion of rage, it's a rebellion of clarity. One that spreads not by shouting down the crowd, but by living as proof that another way is possible. So here's your next step. Leave a comment with the moment in your life when you realized you were thinking differently from the people around you, your own awakening moment. I read them, and so do others in this community. Your story might be the spark that wakes someone else. And then, share this video with just one person who you think is ready to see more clearly, not to argue with them, not to win them over, but to plant a seed. The more awake individuals there are, the weaker the spell of mass delusion becomes. Let the madness rage if it must. You have found something deeper. You have found yourself,